Hello? Let me make sure this volume is working. I guess I will find out in a few minutes when I hook everything up. It's a minimum. Okay. If not, it'll be going back to Tarjay. All right. So, um, I'd like to give a shout out. Got to make a whole shout out to the Lord. Um, no, real talk. So, first and foremost, my basis for this podcast is going to be finances with military families, people who have dealt with coming into new government money or an inheritance, and what to do and what not to do about it. I'll also speak about relationships. I can only speak about what I have experienced. Some people on streaming during the pandemic basically frowned upon it. It's not my problem. My problem is a lot of people who are newly enlisted or officers don't know how to navigate their money, number one. Number two, they often have issues with who they feel that they can share their struggles with. If you've never been military, then you probably, I'm going to make this a get ready with me stream. You probably don't know the struggle of a lot of military wives. They often get the wrong misconception of being spoiled brats. I use that term loosely only because I was an army brat. I'm not sure if I will release what CONUS I was primarily raised in, but it was one of the largest army bases in the United States. I was unaware of that growing up as a kid. I just knew it was home. I didn't not have a choice. My father just joined, not randomly. He needed a way to pay for school. And I guess his intentions as an engineer was to go in for 4 years, pay for college, and then get out, go to school, work part time with my mom working part time, and then I guess go from there. That was the initial reasoning. He interned for the military, liked it. It allowed him to do a job that he very much was interested in, and he liked it enough to stay in. Now, I will, at a certain point, if I continue to do this broadcast, I will make sure to have a subject or have a beginning, middle, and an end. I tend to ramble at times when I speak, only because that is just the way that my thought process is. I often wear, it's from my dad, scarves. One, because of the company that I keep. Two, I have a big 5 head, just like my father, just like Tyra. And it's just one of those things that I just became accustomed to. It's also probably, I might do a beauty thing on how much it actually costs a woman to upkeep herself as she grows into herself or gets older. And, maybe do it with a couple of male friends on when you guys go out to the club, how much are y'all actually spending? And then how much is that woman spending? There was a debate a few years ago. I know, I think it was New York or something. I'll have to find the article. I guess that'll be the first subject of this podcast. When you are newly single and in a military town, there are often a lot of free for female deals because there's a large male population. And so, how do you go about that? Well, if you're making, let's say, less than 3 grand a month, if that, as a E1 to E3, before you become a part of the E4 mafia, you don't have any bills. You are newly away from, you're probably 17, 18, 19 years old, newly away from mommy and daddy. And you choose to you have the first time in your life opportunity to allow yourself to pay for something that you want. Whether you want to have a drink, because you can more than likely get a soda. I always do. I always had a ginger beer or ginger ale, water, sparkling water. It was just as a female, always having the item closed or sealed. And being a designated driver probably kept me safer than a lot of other females. Could never wake up and accuse anybody of anything. I could just wake up and say, girl, you were just being stupid. Now, why would you do that? Don't do that. Okay. I will be getting a better camera. I like to talk because I feel that I have the opportunity to help others and to use what I know and the wisdom that I do have for those that do want my help, and stop trying to force it onto those that may not really care. Okay. So that's where I am in my life. So that's really about it. I will try my best to be a little bit more organized. The first thing that I will say is my experience. Okay, well, my experience with dating life, if that's what this first podcast is going to be about, is how your choices and who you date affects your pay. So I'm a historian by trade. I went to Historical Black University. I often talk about it when I do live stream. I'm a very private person, only because my dad was very quiet. The military town that I do live in, a lot of the job, people live often go off to work for the Secret Service. A lot of the jobs, you do need a secret clearance. There are quite a few people who work for the government that cannot talk about their jobs, or they could lose their job, or somebody finds out. Their clearance is to find out if you're talking about your job. So you don't talk about your job. It's just one of those things about Department of Defense you have to get used to, whether you like it or not. If you want to work for the government, these are the rules that they make when you sign your contract, whether you are active duty, former military, veteran status, veteran's wife, or girlfriend. You should not speak or talk to your dating life partner what you do or don't do off base or on base or overseas or wherever it is that they send you around the country. And that's just what it is. Now, I can only speak from 1983 until present. And that's what I'm going to do. I will bring others. It's not going to just be all about me. I go by the name Kiki. If anyone ever does see me on social media, I am an ordinator. So I do perform weddings, and this is something that often comes up near military bases. If anyone does not know, I will let you know. When you are in the military, you cannot live on base or even off base if you're a certain rank, and unless you get certain permissions. Certain groups, like if you're on teams, so if you're special operations, special forces, certain specialties in 82nd Airborne, warrant officers, or an officer, you are allotted to live off base. So you're given an allotment of what's called BAH, Base Allowance Housing. And so you get an extra few $1,000s according to the housing in that area. One of the highest, usually when you go overseas, Korea, Japan, Europe, or Germany. But then in the United States, I know one of the highest I know of is in Alaska or Hawaii. And then, of course, some of the, if you have a connection to the islands, like Guam or Samoa, USA Samoa, and I said Hawaii. But the reasoning is the cost of living is much higher. So it goes off of the area that you live in. So the area that I lived in, um, albeit is not as expensive. So the allotted BAH that we got, I think at that time in 2008 to, oh, excuse me, yeah, the 2008 to 2009 was roughly $1,200. When we moved to Florida, the area was a retirement area, but we lived in a tourist beach area. And so I believe it was close to what we got in North Carolina, but it was actually more, I say maybe 1100 because of the cost of living. If we probably lived in a place like Orlando or Miami, it may have been maybe, anywhere from 12 to 1500, or Jacksonville. It really depended on the area. And so you don't have to pay for rent, or you don't have to pay for your mortgage per se, but then you still have to. And this is why there are a lot of working part time or full time. Um, I'm a generational military spouse, so my mother was also an army wife, and she would talk about it, and that's why I say I will speak about the 1980s. Shout out to anybody who served during Desert Storm. Kudos to you. My father never went overseas, but he did train quite a few soldiers who did go overseas, who did serve during those, however many years it was. I just remember as a young child, between the ages of 5 to 6, that the soldiers were always here, and then suddenly, slowly, after about 6 months, they were gone. And then I remember my parents always would watch the news, and then seeing that a few of the Korean sewing places were starting to close house. It was that bad. It made the state news, and ABC News 11, and how devastating it was that, soldiers need patches. These places provided that service, or sewing, or seamstresses, and then that line of credit, that line of money was now literally all overseas for almost a year or two. And I think that's why, as an adult, watching a Jarhead, and that was the name of the movie, Jarhead, write a book, they're usually the first, Marines are usually the first to go over there. The closest one near me was Camp Lejeune. And so to see someone's experience, read about it, it become good enough to become a movie, and then you see and experience, visually what your parent, or what your parent was training for, was quite interesting. I may have to go back and read the book. Now, you you know a lot of women who join, I can't understand what the gravity of choosing a lifestyle where you are going to be a minority by being a female in uniform. And then you have to let a few comments, you have to let a few behaviors slide, because there's this locker room syndrome often that happens amongst a lot of men. Women too, we talk too. But when you are active duty female on the weekends, you can either choose to be by the book, the training that you received when you did AIT, which is the training that you get for your job, after you've done, once you've done basic. And unless you move often, your reputation precedes you. I'll be nice. When you're working around a lot of men, it's just like if you're a cop or police officer, you are around a lot of men. And so it does sometimes become competition if you're not already engaged or married. Who is going to speak with this female first? So you might see within the podcast me change my jargon, maybe more military geared, because that's what I've lived around a majority of my life. I have lived in civilian towns before. I'm currently in one at the moment, visiting family. And so if it's best for me to do a podcast where I speak about something that I know, and then maybe, go and interview people. That's one of the things that I'm actually currently doing. I want to email a couple of different ethnicities and different types of religious group if they're willing to be on camera, or if just they just want their voices heard on the different ways that people court. And I know that sometimes for a lot of uniformed service members, being away from home, whether they are religious or not, it your your values are put into play, sadly. And it's really up to that person to either continue to go by what they were raised, and then sometimes the military allows that person to explore away from family what they do, or what they weren't around all their life. And that's a beautiful thing as well. You can finally be yourself. And there are times where people will try to run away from what they were taught, or if they weren't raised religiously at all, they will find someone that is religious. I've found that as well. Or they will go to functions that maybe were shunned as children, or they didn't understand the importance of community. And that's something that the military does very much pride itself on, you being a part of a team, you being a part of a group. One of the core values is making sure that you are not an individual in the military, that you are there as an accumulative. I'm only speaking from an ROTC concept, not from an active duty concept. I always try to reiterate that. I did attempt to join during the pandemic. I missed the recruiters' way of, they now try to check your social media before they proceed on further. And for whatever reason, I didn't see the recruiter from the Air Forces. They found the wrong Facebook page. I'll just be nice. And so because of that, I didn't join. I didn't pursue it either. I had other things going on, and that were military related as well. But I'm not probably going to talk about that on this podcast. But it was actually a good thing. One good thing is my father growing up often would say, if you ever need help, don't be afraid to ask those that I was around. He pointed to a building next to our main post in the 90s, and he says, those people right there, they're a little different or a little weird, but they're good at heart and they get things done. And so if you're ever in trouble, write a letter and maybe they might address it. And so I always kept that in the back of my mind, that, even though I was not active duty, many of my family members were. And if I did ever need help, or if I had something traumatic happen to me that I couldn't explain, I could go to them. And I did. And I appreciate that. So there might be times where maybe I might speak about a subject that, if you are military, former military, or active duty, you may know what I'm talking about. But as a civilian or someone who's never been around a military lifestyle, you may be confused. And I may go further into having those who are active duty explain that to the audience. So my next podcast will most definitely probably be, dating in the church, and how does being a service member, or someone who may be interested in dating someone who's a service member, affects that relationship, good, bad, ugly, negatively, and sometimes even positively. A lot of women and men who are dependents, the financial relief of being with someone that is in the military or works for the government is good, but then it also comes with sacrifices, like being away from family, being away from children, and being a far away place than where you were raised. So thank you for tuning in, and it's been nice. And have a blessed day and a happy holiday.